My favourite bit was when he talked about being on holiday and they announced they were going to war. Everyone rushed home, but Grandad stayed on holiday and got drunk. He was at Buckling at Skegness. I would be really frightened if I was on holiday there. His sister must have been even more terrified as the bombs dropped on London. So she travelled to Sheffield. Grandad also helped people get out of the rubble when the bombs dropped and hit the city centre. This is my great-gran, my dad's gran, talking about her experiences during World War II.
Go.
What age were you in World War II?
When war was declared, I was 13.
Okay.
Yes, and it lasted 5 years.
What job did you do in World War II?
Well, I was at school when World War II started,
Okay.
and then I worked in a shop for the first 2 years, and then I went to examine silk in a factory that made parachutes.
Did you have an air raid shelter or a Morrison shelter?
We had what they call an Anderson shelter in the garden, and my father and my brother dug a big hole first and put it in there. It was a dome-shaped thing in sort of aluminium, I think it was, and then they covered it all up with soil.
Did you have a ration book?
Yes, we all had a ration book during the war, and we weren't allowed very much of anything because the ships couldn't bring food in, like the butter couldn't come in from, it could, but the ships might be sunk. So we didn't have much in the way of imports.
When the war ended, how old were you?
I think I was 17. I think I was 17. Yes, somewhere around about 17, yes.
Did you see your family in the war?
I did. I didn't see much of my brother because he was in the Far East because he was a soldier. My father was also a soldier, but he was stationed locally because in Doncaster he was stationed because he didn't go abroad. He'd done his lot in the last war, he'd started his wartime career in Afghanistan all those years ago, and there's still trouble there, isn't there?
What
Yes.
was the worst thing that happened to you during the World War II?
Well, we didn't lose anyone, but I remember feeling so sad when the boys down the road, one of the boys that I knew down the road didn't come back from the war because he was killed. And then a lovely man from the bottom of our road, one of those nice sprightly men that was full of energy. And when he came back, he'd been in a Japanese war camp, and bless him, I could cry now when I think about him. He was a little old man, and that upset me. We weren't in the thick of the bombing, although we saw it. We were near to Sheffield, of course, and they had it badly. And the only thing that my mother and myself and my little sister, we'd been to Mexborough, and of course the buses didn't run after 9 o'clock at night because you'd got to keep everything were blacked out. You see, everybody had to have blackout curtains and they didn't show any light. And the air raid buzzer went, the alarm went, and we were made to go into a communal shelter that was at the bottom of the crags. We were there for a long, long time. It seemed like hours, but I'm not quite sure how long it would be. At least a couple of hours we were there. And when we came out, we had to walk up the crags, you know, to the top of the crags. And we heard something coming through the air. And there was Al Gordon's friend, a friend of my brother's, my mother and my little sister, and we all held hands and we run like hell because we could hear this coming through the air. She's heard it, coming through the air. And it turned out we heard it smash into the hedge. So we assumed that it was some shrapnel. But no, apart from hearing anything, you know, we heard the bombers going over. We heard them going back. And when they came over, sometimes they were very, very heavy with bombs because they were a right deep sound. And we knew when they were going back, whether they were our aircraft or the Germans, we didn't quite know. But if they were empty of bombs, they just sounded a very light buzz, you know, a buzz like that. But if they were full of bombs, they were no. So we knew that somebody was going to get it. Yes, most people would take sandwiches into the shelter. You know, if they got any butter and whatnot, and anything to put on them, they'd mostly take sandwiches into the shelter and some water, something like that. But we were quite fortunate in that we weren't troubled too much. We could tell when the aircraft were near, and if it weren't near about, then we just didn't bother going in the shelter. You know what I mean?
Okay. Did the neighbours go into your shelter?
No, all our neighbours had their own shelter to go into. Yes.
Okay. What did you do to keep cheerful in your shelter?
Well, I can't remember being in there long enough to do anything but want to get out. In the communal shelter, when we were stopped coming from Mexborough, it was too dark to do anything. You know, you couldn't see who were. We only knew that this young man that were near to us was a friend of my brother's because he spoke of it. You know.
Did you sing or anything, Gran? Did you used to sing in the shelters to keep
No,
cheerful? No,
we weren't in the thick of it.
No,
You
okay.
see, that's why. I mean, Conisbrough was just a village.
Yeah.
So, although they made gunpowder down in Deneby, that never seemed to be.
Ration.
Did you ration after the
Did
war?
you ration after
Sorry,
the war?
hang on a
Yeah.
sec.
Did you ration after the war?
Yes, food was rationed after the war, because we'd lost most of the ships anyway. The war had to carry things in, and every country was poor. So we were rationed for years and years after the war. The war finished when I was about 17, and we were still rationed when I was 25. Everything wasn't taken off ration at the one time. And eggs weren't rationed. Eggs weren't rationed, but you couldn't get them because those who got hens were keeping them for themselves because it was sustenance for them, you see. So we got an odd egg every now and again from the shop. So you can have an egg this week, Mrs. Marshall, you know. Yes, it was a long, long time before you could buy butter and sugar and that to bake with.
What was your full name?
During the war,
Yeah.
well, before I was married, it was Gwyneth Williams. Once I got married, when I was 19, it became Mrs. Gwyneth Marshall, which it is still today.
From listening to Gran and Grandad, I think it would be very scary, and I'm glad I wasn't born during World War II. Today I have been to Kelham Island and I have made a gas mask. That was my favourite thing, so I'd like to show you it. It took me quite a long time to make this. If they dropped bombs, they used the gas mask to stop you breathing in dust and gases.